Okay, we are live here. Welcome everyone to the artwork of Viper in the Court here, live chat. I'm here with author and CEO of Balance of Seven, Ynes Malakova. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Super, super happy to be here. Really, really, really excited to talk about so much of the stuff we're going to
Yeah,
reveal. So,
yeah. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about her book, A Viper in the Court, and some of the artwork that I've been doing for it over the past year or so. And we're going to be kind of taking a deep dive into the artwork itself, a little bit about my process, how it relates to the prompts I received for the artwork, how it relates to the content of the book and sort of the world building element there. And we're going to be talking, we're going to be checking out some new artwork that we haven't shared with the
really,
world yet. So I think we're going through 5 or so pieces, maybe
yeah,
6, something like that.
it's a lot.
I think as people are coming in here, feel free to drop any questions during the chat. This is pretty informal. We're just going to be talking a little bit about the work and sort of where it comes from. So if you guys have any comments or questions during the stream, feel free to drop them in the chat there. So I guess how I'd like to start is. Inez, could you tell us a little bit about Viper in the Court, the book you're working on, and
Sure.
as well as Balance of Seven, the publisher?
Sure thing. Absolutely. I'll start by talking a little bit about the book. So, A Viper in the Court. This is a project that I have been working on for a very, very, very long time. Um, I think the idea or the initial kind of idea came into my life when I was maybe about 15 years old, if you could believe it. And, I just kind of dismissed it and, went about my life. But in 2017, I got really serious about sitting down and writing this. And of course, it is now 2022. So it's just taken quite a while to get through and sometimes the writing process can be very quick. Sometimes it can be really, really, really slow. And with this particular book, it's a very unique book. So it's got some challenges in it that have made it take a little bit longer. For example, a lot of the research that went into it took a lot to really dive into. A lot of the world building as well took a long time to figure out. And essentially, even just figuring out where to start the story, because sometimes when you have these massive worlds, it's very hard to figure out, well, where does the story start exactly? And who does it focus on? Where I arrived, eventually, I say we because it took a lot of people to help me through this process, um, including my cohort in crime, so to speak, and Balance of Seven, Theodore Naratek Tinker, and who is just world builder extraordinaire. I think at one point I was just ready to trash this whole project, and he's like, "No, no, 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 no. We're gonna fix this. It's gonna be okay." So, um, but essentially, just to tell you a little bit about the story itself, what is this crazy story that has taken so long to write? Well, it is a story about a girl named Laurel Alendry, and she has these empathic powers that are given to her by the moon. And that sounds like a really awesome thing because she can see and she can feel into the hearts and minds of others. If she is in a location, she's very sensitive to the energy there. And she knows a lot about the world without just consciously knowing about it. She feels these things just intrinsically. And the challenge that she really faces with that is that it makes her insane. So she has these bouts of insanity and these bouts where she just doesn't really know what's real and she doesn't know what isn't. So I'd say that's one of the challenges in writing this book is essentially getting to sit down with Laurel and have her tell me her story. Because sometimes it's just kind of out of order, or, I don't know if some of what, I'm kind of getting from this character is real, or if it's not real, or what's going on there. But it's very much a coming of age book. You do have a lot of characters who are inspired, kind of like Laurel, from tarot cards. And essentially, I am thinking if I want to go into the whole tarot card thing or not. I guess I kind of have to explain the story. Tarot cards actually were a card game that was played in the early Italian courts. We're talking, I'm always going to get the dates wrong, but we're talking around the 15th century. And what's really interesting about tarot is that this is really when it was played in those early courts, this was like an everyday card game. This was like playing bridge. It was a fortune telling game, but it was most definitely a game. It didn't really have the divination or the esoteric origins that we associate with tarot cards today. That really happened closer to the 1800s when we started kind of looking at tarot in a more mystical manner. So what I really did when thinking about this book is that I kind of squished together all of these things that had been culminating in my mind for a long time. These tarot cards, which I've always had a fascination with. Early literature, essentially. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get more into the characters, but that's my major in college is actually early literature. I really liked there was a joke about me for a while that, if it was written after 1700, I probably haven't read it. But I really like the ancient stuff. And, I'm really into sort of the more romanticism era of poetry and writing as well, which is this deep emotional, very intense sort of writing style. So kind of rolling all of that together, we got A Viper in the Court. So that's a little bit about the story in general. I have always kind of been more of a kind of an auditory writer. Sometimes in writing processes, sometimes people can see their characters and they can see the scenes kind of unfold before them. That's not really how I write. I tend to be a little bit more auditory, where I sit down and I journal a lot about the characters and I journal about their stories and, just kind of try to hear them out. So developing visuals for the characters was a particular challenge for me. I didn't really know that much about them, honestly, on the visuals. I had to journal that out a lot. But thankfully, I met you, and you, Evan, know a lot about visuals, and you know a lot about, essentially how to bring these visions to life. And what's really very cool about that, a little Easter egg here, is, when we think about the original tarot cards out there, which all my characters are based around tarot cards, but when we think about the original tarot cards in the early Italian courts, the printing press didn't exist at that time. So they were all hand painted. So I think it's just really extra special that all of my characters are hand painted too by you.
Yeah, in a way, hand painted on an electronic machine, but
Oh yeah,
something
we
pretty
come
much the
out of
same.
the
Yeah.
yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, I never really knew that about the cards and about sort of how that was a bit of your inspiration for these characters. And I should also mention too that Ynes was pretty much my first and has been my longest running client since I started doing digital art in a professional sense around, I want to say 2017 or late 2017 or early 2018 or something. One of my first jobs was making a book cover um, for the first of
Then,
the Dragons
yeah.
Within books, and I ended up doing two more of those, and then Ines just started bringing me on for a lot of the work for Viper in the Court, and so I just have to publicly thank you for all of the work, like a ton of work you've given me over the years, and you've just been like a huge supporter of my work. So I want that to be known, and it's appreciated.
Thank you. I should be thanking you for coming up with such awesome stuff.
Well,
So
it works
it's
out then.
mutual for sure.
Yeah.
And I actually have this print up here in my house, and it's lovely. I get to see it every day. This is actually one of the Dragons Within covers,
Mhm.
and I'm going to brag on you for a second here. But this
Please.
one, actually, yeah, this cover for the Dragons Within book, this specific cover, has officially made you an award-winning illustrator. So huge congratulations on that.
Hmm.
It came in first place for technical illustration in the Bookfest Awards that recently happened. So really huge, really important.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been, and I believe that book was also a number one Amazon bestseller for a while too, right?
It was,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's pretty
that's
cool.
right.
Um, Awesome. Well, I think, maybe we can start getting into some of this artwork here and talking a little bit about that. Um, yeah, the good stuff,
Right.
the real meat of the sandwich, so to speak. And also, I should mention, if you guys ever have any technical issues during the stream, just drop a message in the chat. We did a little test before this, but you never know what can happen with these live events. So, please let us know if there are any problems. Cool. So let's move on
Let's do
to
it.
the first
Yeah.
piece. So these are actually, I believe we're going through these in chronological order.
Oh,
Um,
cool. Oh, we're gonna start with who's it gonna be? Vitus
it's
first?
going to be Vitus, yes. So
Ah,
let's
that's
bring that
cool.
up here.
All
Um,
right.
so
Why-
yeah, this was, I want to say I made this was a couple years. I don't know.
Yeah, I
Do you
mean,
remember
we've
when
been
this was?
working on this for a while,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this character and
yeah.
where this all comes from?
Very, very, very interesting. Kind of an exciting place to start. Vitus Grimstead is actually the antagonist of a Viper in the Court.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, he was originally like the tarot card that I associate with him is actually the Hanged Man. And what's really kind of cool about that, about all of the tarot cards, really, one of the themes that I have in this book, well, in what's going to be the whole series, essentially, is this theme of duality. And when we think about tarot cards, if any of us are familiar with how they actually work, there's kind of two sides to them, or two different ways to read them. If you look into the more esoteric, kind of more mystical side of them, you have the upright side, which is kind of its normal position, but you also can, if you pull the card and it's reversed, that means something entirely different. So when looking at these characters, I wanted to be able to show that and tell also that there are two sides to them. With Vitus Grimstead, he was actually from a clan of hunters and he was a trapper. So he and his clan of trappers would go around and they would create snares and traps for their, to capture animals, sell them for fur. And he really enjoyed it. He really enjoyed the outdoors, but he felt that there was something else he should be doing in his life. He loved the thrill of the hunt, but hunting animals just was not enough for him. And he soon learned that he could use his snares and he could use these traps and these ropes to trap humans, essentially. And he swore that he was going to right the wrongs of the world with these traps and these snares. He went off to become an enforcer, and he essentially was very well regarded for quite some time, because he was able to really think and sense things almost like on an animal level. So he could tell people's movements, and just very, very, very adept at that and very good at trapping. However, over time, and I can't give away spoilers here, but he developed a little bit of a twisted sense of justice. So he started using his traps in ways where he started thinking about how the end really justifies the means. It doesn't matter how he gets these criminals, it just matters that he gets them. And that's really the darker side of this character, who was once very just. If you even think about, so his, I've given all of the characters these names, essentially. They're not straight tarot card names, they're inspired by tarot cards and mythology, etc. So Vitus is known as the Noose Master because he is very much into capturing criminals, hanging them, and it's how he gets his justice, his personal brand of justice.
Wow. Yeah. It was really cool going into this one with that sort of like, I guess I rarely get a chance to paint a villain, or at least like, a pseudo villain, even if he's sort of a little bit morally gray, or like has, in fact, I think one of the biggest challenges with this was, sort of not having it not be overtly villainous, right? He's just kind of like, he's making him
He's
more
just a
human.
guy, yeah.
Yeah. Who, has been maybe twisted, or has just had some tough luck, and he made some choices that led him down this path. It's pretty interesting to kind of have that challenge.
Mm-hmm. And you did something really cool with that particular character image too, where we talked a little bit about the hanged man and the hanging. If you look at the original card, I was going to bring my tarot cards and I can't find them. Essentially, if you look at the original card, though, you see a man who is hanging by his ankle from the tree of life. And of course, I wanted to show that reversed version of that with Vitus Grimstead, where he is hanging others, in this upright position instead of kind of hanging from this tree of enlightenment himself. So I really like how you added in some details around the hanging side of things. It was very cool.
Yeah, I've just realized there's a flaw in a technical flaw in my streaming plan here, because Zoom has recently introduced this terrible limitation where I'm limited to 40 minutes. So I think what we're gonna have to do is just restart the meeting every 40 minutes or so, which is not ideal.
But with the villain.
Yeah. So we'll just I'm just gonna end this real quickly. Everyone stick around. We're just gonna restart this, and we'll get right back into it.
Stick around for more awesomeness.
Yeah.
See you in a second.
Okay, we're back.
We're back.
Oh man, yeah, I gotta figure that out. But yeah, let's just keep rolling here.
Let's do it. Yeah.
So I think we can,
Are we gonna drum roll and like get to the
yes, yeah. So I mean, if
awesome.
I think whether you're an artist or whether you're just kind of interested in the process, you may find this stuff sort of interesting. But since we're looking at the first piece here, I figured it would make sense to sort of start with sort of the first phase of the process, which would actually be sort of gathering references. And this is just like a sample of the reference board I was using for this. Um,
Oh, I'm
and
excited. I don't think I've even seen this.
no, and this is like the
Cool.
raw, real stuff. You can see I took
Yes.
some pictures of myself in my bathroom because that was the only place I had the mirror because I was trying to create these
Oh, like
hand
face
references.
references and yeah.
Yeah. And I believe there was, like some scarred elements, so I found some horrible pictures from
That's
Google.
right. Yeah, he's got, this is not someone who has been through some nice things in life, folks.
Yeah.
He's
Of
pretty
course.
scarred up, burnt up. He hadn't had a good life.
Yeah. Yeah. Finding, pictures of celebrities and sort of rugged looking people that sort of closely match the description you provided. Um, and, everything from clothing references to this is actually cool. I really wanted to highlight this too because these were some of your own uh,
Yeah.
drawings,
Oh,
right?
that's right. Yeah. They don't look like yours.
Well, that's why they hire me.
That's right.
Yeah, but yeah, I
I
wanted to
know.
show this,
Yeah.
and we can, I've brought up a couple more of these too, just to kind of show like, this is the very first phase of my process. So after I get the brief, which Inez is really great about providing a lot of detail, and we'll kind of, I'm gonna touch back on that a little bit later too
Yeah.
when we're talking about like how to navigate like the client artist relationship. But that's always been
Yeah,
something that's been super helpful.
exactly. Because there's detail and there's too much
Right.
detail.
It can go both ways. But I think
Yeah.
it's generally like I always prefer to have at least like if somebody has an idea of what they want, to be clear and specific about that up front, then like not including that information. And of course, if you don't know, then that's fine too. And plenty of people will just give me a lot of creative input on that. But so that's sort of the first phase of things. And then what I do from there is this is funny because like you'll see as we go through these how I approach these differently. I'm noticing from the signature here, this was from 2020. So
Mhm.
this was at least almost 2 years ago, and
It's
so
wild.
at the time I was exploring more kind of like sketchy gestural stuff, and you'll see later this phase looks a little bit different, but the essence of it is the same, where I'm basically taking some quick passes at different poses, and like for any kind of character work, that's going to be the most important. It's basically the composition of the character, and their pose is going to say 60 to 80% of what the mood is and what the character is about. So I usually start with this, and I create a few different variations, and from there I will let you pick which one sort of feels the most on point in terms of like the character's mood. I believe what we ended up going with was um, let's see here. I think it was maybe
I
three
know.
or some
I'm trying
variation on
to,
that. You can see
yeah,
it
I'm
kind
trying
of
to remember because
shifted a
it's just
little
been so
bit.
long. Yeah.
Um, but
And I'm sure whatever decision we made was brilliant.
yeah.
And
And from there, this is kind of the sketch I ended up coming up with, and then we ended up developing it further into this, and actually ended up creating this custom symbol here for this character. And we can get into that a little bit next. I did want to just take a chance to see if anyone in the chat had some stuff to say or questions. Lots of positive statements here.
Yay. Well, as well there should be, because your art's amazing. So
All right, yeah, Todd's saying image is blurry, but maybe those are just your settings. Thanks for letting me know anyway. Yeah, sometimes it can be, if the internet is a little bit slow or something like that, it will drop to a lower quality. But yeah, let me know if you guys have any issues with the image quality. Cool. Let's talk about the logo a little bit, because this was also a it's not something I do all the time, but it was sort of a unique little challenge. Why don't you say a little bit about where this comes from and what the idea was?
For sure. Yeah, snakes are a really big part. I mean, Viper in the Court. You'll learn a little bit more about the, as kind of this storyline and book goes on, you'll learn about this group called the Serpentine as well. So snakes are just a huge part of this world, a huge part of this mythology, and that particular symbol, I kind of noodled around with it. Gosh, I want to say like in I think it was like 2015 when I came up with it, believe it or not, before I even got serious about writing the story.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, I know that there's this military force out there in this world. I don't know what they're called. I don't know anything about them, but I know that their symbol is this Ouroboros, which is the snake eating itself. But it's not like a regular Ouroboros. This is like a kind of skeletal looking thing, essentially. This is the skeleton of a snake kind of eating itself. So that was kind of the symbol that I had really come up with for this. And then as I delved more into the world building side of things, I came up with a name for the military faction of this world. It's the Deus Tactigit, which is just loosely, based on Latin. It's kind of like the quote unquote God touched, because there are these 9 generals, and each of them has been in a life or death situation where something could have killed them and should have killed them, but due to some kind of phenomenon, essentially, or something special about them, they survived. And so they kind of rose the ranks and became Deus Tactigit, God touched, very revered, very special, really the best warriors out there. So that symbol is something that they all wear to distinguish them as Deus Tactigit, to show that they, it's this dichotomy of life and death, this kind of spectrum there of, they should be dead, but they've continued to live. That's essentially what the symbol is all about. We talked a little bit about Vitus Grimstead and his sense of justice. And essentially his amazing feat that he did is that he was able to rid this entire kingdom of organized crime through a series of snares and traps, and really just flushing these people out of these hiding spots where they thought they were safe, but he was able to track them down. Again, he has not had an easy life. He's a little bit scarred up. He's a little bit burnt up, a little rough.
Do a little detail there.
Yeah. But he is definitely Deus Tactigit. And so it was really important to have that symbol there to distinguish him as such.
Yeah. Yeah, there was another thing I wanted to mention with this one too, which I'll probably be returning to as we move on to the other ones, but just sort of like the role of lighting in conveying mood and character. And I made a deliberate choice with this one in terms of lighting, which was to sort of create this, we have, I don't want to get super technical, but basically we have a direct, harsh light source coming and sort of like creating the impression of like a sunny day, which is providing this rim light, which is sort of a warmer light source, contrasted against sort of this cool ambient light source. And this is sort of a pretty common lighting scheme for me to set up. In this case, I've kind of dialed up the coolness, and also sort of reduced the overall color temperature to a much cooler, more neutral tone, which can really give, this less of like, there's kind of this contrast where it's like a sunny day, but it doesn't feel warm. And that was kind of what I was trying to convey here with those color and lighting choices.
It was perfect. It really was. We talked a little bit about dichotomy also, and not really showing, none of my characters are all good or all bad. I think that's too easy. That's not how life works. That's not how people are. So I wanted to make sure that got conveyed through the characters. There is this, there's this good side to all of them. There's also this very dark side. And I think that the way you worked with lighting with all of them, and you worked with the poses, I think you really captured it in a number of ways.
Right on. Yeah, we can, I think we can move on to the next one here, which would be Corcoran.
Oh, my favorite.
Yeah, I like how this one turned out as well. But yeah, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about Corcoran?
Oh, Corcoran, yeah. I didn't say that much about him in the, well, you'll see I have these little, we'll talk about it at the end here, but I've got little story cards for all of them now too. But Corcoran, he is inspired by the tarot cards, the Sun and the Chariot, kind of both of them at once. And here's kind of where we get into some of the, I'm talking a lot about the background stuff because no spoilers, right? For the story. But essentially we get a lot into, I was very, very, very inspired by early Irish literature, essentially. It's really kind of more oral tradition at that point, because we're talking like way, 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 way back. I even have like my book here, The Tane, that talks about that. Very inspired by the story of Cuchulainn, who is known as the Hound of Ulster, and kind of this relationship that he has with his foster brother. And you'll see, we'll get into the foster brother thing in a little bit here as well, because that's one of the characters too. So Corcoran is known as the fire starter. Essentially, he is just kind of getting to know his character a little bit. In my head, when I did like all my journaling stuff, he's the one who could never be quiet. He's very brash, he's very arrogant, and he just loves to talk about himself. He will not stop talking about himself. Oh my goodness. And he is very good looking, and he knows it. And he just kind of wants to, really, when I started out this story and when I started out, this whole book, I thought I was going to be writing a story about Corcoran and Roland, and essentially this whole relationship that they have as foster brothers, and eventually as brothers in arms, as they go into some warring and they go out into the battlefield. It's very interesting because instead I have kind of wound up in a place where I'm telling this from Laurel's point of view, which adds kind of this layer of complexity too. Because Corcoran is very, I think you captured it really well in the pose. He was originally a farmer's son, and he loved the outdoors. He loved horses, and he loved to just, be very kind of wild and free, essentially. Um, all of that changed when his father died, and he ended up an orphan, essentially. He was taken in by his best friend's family, Roland Brandt and his father. We'll hear about them in a little bit. But essentially, in the story, Roland is his best friend and a blacksmith. And when Corcoran went to go live over with the family of blacksmiths, that's really when his life changed. It was the first time that he ever held a sword in his hands, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world to him. It was just very easy for him to love the feel of it, to just be fascinated by it. He ended up in a situation where he really, was struggling to survive and struggling to get by. He wound up in a little bit of trouble and essentially had a choice between going to the army or going to jail. Not much of a choice, really. So he, quote unquote, chose to join the military. And whereas he thought that this was just kind of an easy way out of kind of prison time, he ended up really finding his calling with this. And he learned that this natural ability that he really had for loving the outdoors, for loving horses in particular, very, very, very fond of horses, and for weaponry, just made him very good, really perfect for this kind of life and this kind of lifestyle. So a lot of that, he longed for respect after having so little and after having lost everything that once was his. And when he rose through the ranks, he gained a lot of that confidence. He gained a lot of arrogance from that. And, he started making some decisions that maybe were getting him into some high places, but maybe weren't the best decisions to be making. He's what you would consider an anti-hero. So he's someone who's got these heroic qualities and heroic traits. We really see that more from Laurel's point of view because she's able to kind of look past she's the empath. She can look past and feel past the brashness. But he's not always making good choices. So that's a little about him. He's the troublemaker. He's the fire starter.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, we're seeing hints of the fire starting happening in the background here, as well as the killing and the anti-hero qualities here. Yeah, this one was super fun. Again, I guess I just love creating characters that sort of occupy that intermediate zone, that have a little bit of complexity to them, that aren't just overtly heroes or villains. Let's see, we had a question here. Charlene is asking, along the right hand side, we're seeing the color palette used. Oh no, this is just my color picker. That was actually kind of a coincidence that happened to be the same color range, but I can set that to whatever. This is the digital palette, so to speak, that I used to paint with. And Todd's saying the smoke coming off the gun and merging with the smoke above looks amazing. Thank you. Yeah, I think one of the things I really I was exploring with this one, and definitely artistically at the time, I was exploring a lot, was this idea of creating hard and lost edges. So you can see here, and creating focus through hard and lost edges. So what I did with this piece and with a lot of the subsequent pieces is sort of creating areas of deliberate non-interest. So, for example, if we look down here, I could have maybe taken the time to put as much detail and render everything out as well as I have with the main character here, but I've kind of left this area sort of ambiguous. And if you zoom in on a lot of these places, they're very rough, they're very undefined, and wouldn't really like stand well on their own. But in the whole context of the image, they actually help to draw more focus towards the most important areas that I've put more detail into. I've highlighted with stronger light, stronger contrast, and I've also used sort of harder edges to describe the silhouette and the form here. And that's kind of a fun way I like to apply sort of a more traditional painting style too. With these backgrounds, I can use sort of like, mock oil paints to sort of, move the pixels around and blend. And I can do it now and totally ruin this piece. I'm not going to do that.
I will never hear the end of it from Corcoran if you do that.
Yeah, that's kind of the fun of this digital art, is you can mess it up whenever you want. The other thing about this that I kind of wanted to touch on here too was, and of course, we have the reference board here as well. I even took a picture of myself to use as a pose reference here, and we've got sometimes I'll take some little bits of text and work that into my reference board as well if there's any updates like that. These were actually, I was just asking myself why these were included here, and those were actually light references for the hair.
Yeah, we talked about that hair.
Yeah.
We talked about the horses too, because originally,
right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit about your process here on, we as writers, sometimes there's a lot of stuff we want to put into images. And, I'm always saying nowadays, gosh, probably writers are getting like really sick of hearing me say this, but sometimes we have to do like Project Runway, and we have to, as Tim Gunn would say, edit our ideas. Mm. We cannot put all things into, a visual, right? So when I originally had sent you some details about this, Evan, I'd been like, yeah, we got to have horses in here. Corcoran's all about the horses. So kind of, how do you figure that out and, make that call that, hey, maybe this isn't such a, great idea in the idea phase, not such a great idea in the execution phase.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I don't know, now I may have, I guess the more I've developed in terms of my own skills and as an artist, I think the more flexible I can be with that stuff. But there are always going to be limitations, and sometimes, like you did, authors will come to me with an idea and that seems to make total sense to them, and then I kind of have to sort of explain maybe how it may not work in terms of composition or in terms of the general feel of things. I think in this case it was maybe a non-essential detail that may have been how you wrote it up, kind of like this might be a really cool thing to have in there. And I think basically what I said is it would be much simpler to not have that there, because I guess a lot when you kind of stuff a whole bunch of things into a painting, a whole bunch of different ideas and details, it can really clutter up the image and sort of draw attention away from the most important elements. And of course there are tons of fantastic artists out there that can really deftly create a whole bunch of different areas of focus and sort of balance them out, but it's a very difficult thing to do properly. And I find that the best images are usually the simplest ones. So instead of having a whole bunch of stuff going on behind him here, I sort of suggested we just keep it simple and stick with like the general silhouette, and then some of these other supporting details that are sort of well out of the way, and a little bit off to the side or to the ground, where they're not going to be competing for attention, essentially.
Oh, believe me, he doesn't mind being the center of attention.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
exactly. And it's almost it reinforces the character too a little
There
bit
you
in
go.
a
Yeah,
symbolic way, I guess.
makes total sense. I guess it's a little bit like cooking, where it's like you can't throw every ingredient into a dish and expect it. I mean, well, I don't know. Maybe if you're on top or something, you can, but
Yeah, yeah.
most people can't do that.
Yeah. And I think, this is also sort of an example of like something I would recommend to artists generally, which is to just sort of like know your limits a little bit, and to if there's something, if there's flexibility, let's say go with a thing that's gonna be not like you're not creating problems for yourself, essentially. To like earlier on, if you see something that might be problematic, bring that up and make a suggestion. I've done that tons of times, and as long as I'm communicating and framing things right, nobody's ever upset if you say like, hey, like this might not work, how would you feel about like this instead. That's usually totally fine.
And we're writers. We don't know.
Right, right. Yeah, and we'll definitely circle back on a lot of that too, in terms of navigating that space. And yeah, I think with this one too, I mean, I've brought up some of the other layers here. This was these were some of the character options, and you can see, as I was saying before, how my style of what I'm presenting here has changed a little bit. I think I put a little bit more time into this than I usually did because I was just having so much fun with it. But we ended up going with, these are all kind of very dynamic. Actually, no, this wasn't
You
even.
had this, you're like, I think you had
This was
posted
unrelated.
something like, okay. Yeah, you posted something on your Instagram. I do remember,
I think it
where
was
you
okay.
were
This
like
was
doing these
you
fear
saw
poses
this
or something.
on
Yeah.
online, and you saw this pose, and you were like, "Can we do a variation of that?"
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so this was actually, I made a separate set of poses.
They were all good. That was a really hard choice. Like,
Yeah, I remember because he had like the two swords, and you were saying like, "No, it looks too much like Deadpool."
yeah, we were getting into some Deadpool stuff. And I'm like, yeah, see, this is where like writers don't always know. I'm like, yeah, two swords. That's
Right, right.
awesome. And you totally have two swords. I'm like, yeah, he's Deadpool.
Yeah, let me see if I can. Oh well, I had those somewhere, but anyway, this is what ended up being the next phase of the sketch, which pretty much, panned out. I didn't really make any major changes to this. If we kind of look between the gun design change, because I think at one point you wanted to introduce more of like what do you call that, like
Oh, the cap and ball
the cap and
pistol
ball
and all.
pistol, yeah,
Yeah, I
like this
researched
one
a lot
here.
of stuff about guns.
Yeah, yeah. um, and that ended up working out really great. This was sort of the before the final update. So this is, usually one of 3 or 4 update phases I will provide to the client, and I find that there's rarely any harm in sharing your process as many times as you're comfortable doing, to get input from the client if you're unsure about something. I've never once had a situation where I got to the last draft, and someone was saying like, "Oh, can you actually, like, I don't know about this. Can you switch this stuff or like change something like that?" and that's because I take the time to send these updates throughout the process, at each kind of phase of development, and that's really been it just takes a second, and it'll give you a chance to have some breathing room from the project. Here we go again, and and it basically, it allows there to be open communication, and an opportunity for input and change if at an earlier phase than if I just like, I sent the sketch and then I just sent this over and I was like, oh, well, I'm finished. Do you like it?
Right.
That's I think rarely works out too well.
Yeah, we'll talk about that more when we talk about like writer artist kind of relationship there, where you do a lot of, as writers, we kind of have to, when we're working with an artist, think a little bit about the artist and their style and their process, and essentially what they do to create pieces. We don't want to get into a place where we're either just not providing enough detail, or we're not giving enough input on like the early phases of a project, or we think that something, oh, it'll look better in a later phase, or that kind of thing. It's always good to just have an open discussion about that stuff. If something isn't looking right or feeling right, then it's good to have that talk earlier. I think from the artist point of view, correct me if I'm wrong here, it's also a lot harder to redraw things and resketch things and recolor things if you're already like in, one of the final phases of a project, rather than, just in a draft stage.
Yeah. Yeah. And fortunately, the digital medium provides a bit of flexibility there. You can kind of have some things on different layers, and as an artist, it's definitely worth developing a workflow where you can make those kinds of edits if needed. But as a writer, I would never, or as a client, I would never expect, like if I got to this phase of development and you said like, oh, can you actually like maybe change the pose a little bit, or like kind of change the color of all the armor, or it's like, to some extent it's possible, but it's never ideal. And usually, again, I've never had to do this, but in that situation, if it required significantly more time, I may have to say like, I can do it, but like, I may have to add like another charge on there or something, or it's just gonna take a little bit longer.
Needs to go for the project in some way.
Yeah, exactly. So, cool. Yeah, let's move on to Roland.
Ooh, Roland. Oh my gosh. Roland was talk a little bit about Roland here.
Oh, actually,
Yeah. Oh,
sorry,
we're
before you
running
start,
out of
let's do
Zoom
the
time.
Zoom witch
Okay,
magic here. Should
Okay.
just take just a second.
Awesome. So we get to step away from the project for a minute and then come back, right?
Exactly. All right, stick around,
See you in a
guys. Be
sec.
back in
Bye.
just a few seconds. All right. Wow, we're getting better at this.
Yeah. Can't get rid of us that easy.
No, no. Okay, yes. So let's dive into Roland a bit here.
All right, Roland. So we can't really understand Roland without understanding Corcoran. And as much as Corcoran would like to say otherwise, vice versa. um, the whole idea, really, inspiration can come from lots of different places. I told you a little bit about the mythology around the Táin and around Cuchulainn, the Hound of Ulster, and all of that stuff. I could, oh my gosh, take a whole other live stream for me to tell you like that whole thing, but we won't go there. that essentially the whole idea of these two came about originally just like turning back the clock, even before I started thinking about the Tane or any of this literature or anything. This is actually kind of my husband's and my little thing that we used to do on weekends where essentially we would play Fable a lot.
Oh yeah, it's a good one.
Oh yeah, like Fable 3 specifically. And during this, my husband decided that he was going to create a character and he was going to try to be as good as possible. And he was going to try to do like all the righteous things and all the, be just a real good guy and, earn whatever good rewards you get. And then my character poofed into the game for about 5 minutes, and all of a sudden his morality shifted all the way to the most evil you could possibly be. And I'm like, sorry. This is how we game together. So, we kind of developed this whole little banter around our characters where they would just heckle each other and give each other a hard time. And mine was always kind of the troublemaker who was always getting him into problems, and he could, and who's always having to bail my character out of, these messes that he got into. And sooner or later, we kind of got into this situation where we're like, our characters need names. And let's just flesh these out a little bit more. So we kind of came up with Roland and Corcoran, or at least the very early versions of Roland and Corcoran. So, again, when we got more into, when I got more into the world building side of things and more of the storytelling side of things, I thought about this, about the Tane, and I thought about this early Irish mythology and about the relationship that Cuchulainn, who is essentially the hero of this ancient Irish tale, he gets into this this really epic battle with his foster brother, a man named Ferdia. And at first, they're kind of playing for sport and they're just kind of having fun with it. And then it just gets really serious, and one of them gets hurt real bad from this. So, this is kind of, and we'll see this as I start to post a little bit more. And, I'm going to do some short stories around these two, especially, and post these up on my website / blog in the fairly near future. But this is really where that, I got a lot of inspiration from that relationship through there. What was really interesting when developing the art for this, or the art side, so Roland is a blacksmith. We talked a little bit about that. I did a lot of research around blacksmiths. I talked to a blacksmith. He probably thought I was like really weird or something because, I asked him to show me his arms because fun little factoid. I'm like, gosh, this person's going to think I'm like, just really forward or something. Like, hey, can I see your arms? Like, can you hold them up? But it's because when someone has been like a blacksmith for a long time, their arms are two different sizes, as strange as that sounds. It's because, they're always hammering away with one arm and the other arm just kind of doesn't get as developed. And it's a thing. So I learned a lot about blacksmiths. I spent a long time interviewing this person who did all the smith work, and a lot of that went into kind of my my description of Roland. He's a big guy. He's got this really cool hammer, and I gotta say, like when I started putting together the description of him, and he's someone who is very much a protector of Corcoran, his foster brother, and somebody who's always looking out for him. He follows Corcoran into the military, actually, and he's got this big shield, huge shield that he uses to fight with, and he's traded essentially his blacksmith hammer for a war hammer, and he is a scary dude. Like, you do not want to run into this guy on the battlefield, and he's actually earned a nickname, which kind of has an association with the tarot card I associate him with, which is death. Um, he becomes known on the battlefield as an omen of death because you see this guy, you're not gonna live long, essentially. Um, so kind of a nod to some of this mythology. Also, I called him the Blackbird. It's also a reference to his blacksmith origins as well. From the art end, though, what I really want to say about this is that when I got to this point where I'm like, okay, it's time for Roland, and I started writing out like the description and stuff. My husband comes up and he starts getting really involved in this process too. Where he's like, hey, he's like sending me pictures, like, I'm like in the middle of Lord knows what I'm doing. And he's like sending me pictures of what's his name? The actor, the Hannibal guy. Someone knows this. Someone put it in chat, please. But he's like sending me pictures of this actor, and he's like, "Here's who I would see Roland kind of looking like." And
the Mads Mikkelsen. Is that the
yes,
one?
thank you.
Yeah.
And so he's like,
because I have him on my reference board here.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Yeah, Derek starts getting really involved. He's like, make sure Evan gets this picture and make sure he gets this one. Did you send them to me? I'm like, good Lord. Whose character is this? And of course he's like, mine. So, that was kind of a fun dynamic with this. But let's talk a little about Roland from the art end. How did you approach this, Evan?
Yeah, this was cool. There were kind of a few different, maybe like a more variety of ideas happening here. I remember one I was thinking of doing one where he was kind of bent over the anvil or whatever, doing his blacksmithing stuff, and then I think that was just sort of something I tossed in there in case it was something we wanted to pursue. But the rest of them, I had some fun creating these sort of more traditional warrior poses and trying to create a pose that created a lot of weight. This one I had some fun just like making some notes and stuff, and kind of formatting it a little bit differently. What we ended up going with was sort of this. Actually, it's funny. I think you picked this one, but it's definitely more of a. It's actually.
I picked it.
Yeah.
Derek picked it.
Right. Oh yeah. Both of you, or maybe he did. But it's like sort of the classic contrapposto stance, which is something that's been used in art forever. It's the classic is the Statue of David, where basically just means that your weight is sort of shifted over to one leg. It's just sort of like a very asymmetrical but casual way to stand, and so I think it ended up shifting into something a little bit more kind of rugged and sturdy here. But this, you can actually see, this was a little update I sent you, where I made all these on Procreate, by the way, on the iPad, and this was like a little screenshot of the sketch where I had it in that point, and then my references over here, which was sort of my typical setup at the time. And yeah, I think in terms of what was unique about this one and what I was really focusing on was again building on that idea of areas of non-interest versus areas of interest, playing with a lot of loose brush strokes and lost edges and stuff like that, where it's really not necessary to have too much definition. I took advantage of the idea that, once again, this is on like a battlefield, so conceivably there's a lot of smoke and dust and particulates in the air. So I selectively created, atmosphere like around areas like this to help reinforce the silhouette. Basically here I have two significant points of focus, and one would be the face, which is usually the primary. And then we kind of had this area too, which I think was a really important character feature, was this hammer. So I highlighted that with light a little bit, and I wanted to make sure that could stand well on its own too. So all of this area here I just made very atmospheric and nondescript, and same down here. So again, from a distance, the silhouette really reads well. This is also an interesting example of the way I treat backgrounds sometimes, because and also an advantage of the digital art is it's usually, especially with like character focused work, it's probably occupies the last like 5% of the process in terms of actually developing it. And here I actually ended up just taking a bunch of these are just sort of like some PNGs of photos of knights and stuff, and I threw them in the background there, and I deliberately dramatically reduced the contrast, and I also sort of just painted them in a little bit. I created areas where the edges were lost, and sort of worked it into the painting, and the whole thing probably took about 10 minutes, but it was a really efficient way, I guess, of creating a lot of implied detail back here, without putting too much time into it.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful piece. Like really, really, really beautiful. And I love it. My husband loves it. It's also really quite lovely. And I think that's when he's like, I want to, right? I think it was around the time that I had picked up this print. And he's like, I want an Evan print too. So we each have one now, and then we each kind of have these characters of, that you created. They're all part of my world and part of my book, but this one's really special to my husband. So and you've done that kind of thing before for like for some other clients, mostly who play Dungeons and Dragons and that kind of thing, where you've created characters for them too, right?
Yeah, totally. That's always a fun challenge too, because people in those groups are so invested in these characters and so specific about them. There's usually a fair amount of upfront detail and explanation involved. But yeah, always a fun challenge to try to extrapolate from those kinds of descriptions.
Right.
Cool. Let's can move on to Laurel.
Oh, this is cool. Yeah, this is a little bit of a departure here from I think what we had been working on up until this point, where Laurel is the first female character that you did, and I'm sure there will be more. So I've got this whole world building aspect with these different classes of women who have these special powers. Laurel is just one of them, and hers is associated with the moon. She's the empathic one. And I think that we had talked a little bit about already how her abilities also drive her to insanity.
Right.
And we just think about how it would actually feel to be able to feel everything that everybody else around us is feeling, and to be so attuned with the history of the places that we're in. I think, it would make anyone crazy, really. So, it's just too much. It's too intense. So a lot of the story really is focused around Laurel obtaining this ability, learning a little bit about what it is, trying and failing to control it within a school that essentially her parents send her to, that is specifically for women who have these special gifts. She's the only one amongst all of her, they're called the Damaka. She's the only one amongst her sister Damaka who doesn't get better at controlling her gift and being able to use it kind of at her will. In fact, she actually gets worse at it over time. It is just very all-consuming, and it just becomes more intense and unruly. So after a point, she leaves. Um, she leaves the Damica. She leaves the academia, which is just the school that she's studying at, essentially. And she runs away into the woods, and she starts hearing and feeling these things about the places that she's in, where there's these voices of the dead that start talking to her, these hanged men in the woods who are telling her about this very dark past that exists in the lands that she's in. And they start asking her for help. So that's a little bit about her story there, and really what drives her into a different place from where she would be. I think that really the important thing about her character is, again, no character is totally good or totally bad. But one thing for sure that I want people to see with her character specifically is that we're all stronger than we think we are.
Hmm.
Um, and one of the things that I think you did a really good job of conveying, I think when I sent this description over to you, Evan, I talked about how I really wanted you to just be a little bit freer with this one in terms of like, you don't have to make it pretty.
Hmm.
um, go a little wild with kind of playing into the insanity side of things. And, it's really when Laurel stops trying to control her power so much that she really steps into it in maybe a difficult way, but a really important one. So I liked that I think you said you had been learning some stuff about Blender around this time, and you were able to really do more with expressions, I think, in this piece than you had done probably with some of the previous ones. Is
Hmm.
that
I don't know if I was definitely doing some stuff with Blender. I don't know if I worked it into this one
okay?
specifically, but yeah, I was doing a lot of work on expressions and just sort of being able to convey a bit more subtlety in terms of mood. Something
Mm-hmm.
that's not just overtly angry or positive or whatever it is, but just kind of being able to convey a little bit of that sort of rage and a bit of that kind of like the insanity.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that too had to do with just like setting up the context too, the ripped clothes and all of that, and like
Mm-hmm.
and the wind too, I think really
Yeah.
helps to create this sort of chaotic energy. That's a device I use quite a lot just to create a bit more movement and energy in a piece.
Right. In the storyline, this was the moment essentially that she leaves the safety of the Damica and of the academia, and she starts to um, go into something different. So
Hmm.
I love that you captured that.
Yeah. Um, cool. Yeah. Let's. What do we have lined up
I
next?
think we got is that Philip
Philip.
next?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to tell you the kind of the title that Laurel has. She's the Moonstruck.
Oh. Oh yeah. And then we. Whoops. We're not there yet. Created this little pendant too to kind of. This is a nice little detail to sort of reinforce that relationship too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the pendant is a really big symbol in the book. It's essentially the thing that she tries to. I'm just wearing my little
Oh,
fun
nice.
necklace, but the things that she kind of uses to try to calm herself down when she's, feeling a lot of, anxiety around the things that she's seeing and that she's hearing. At one point in the story, maybe she loses that, maybe she doesn't.
Not going to give it
And
away, huh?
no, and maybe that causes some bad things for her. Maybe it causes some good things for her, and we'll just have to see.
All right. Great. Yeah. So let's dive into this one a little bit.
Yes, Philip Alendry. That is Laurel's father. And essentially, he is part of a religious sect. I just called it the order here. It's got a whole name and all the stuff, but just for simplicity's sake for this video, essentially, he's part of the order, and he is someone who acts a bit as an emissary and an archivist, where he travels the different lands and he collects these relics and preserves them, and just makes sure that they don't get lost and that they are, properly documented and properly kept up. So as a child, Laurel essentially had, and it's come into play with one of the later pieces, but as a child, Laurel has really grown up around her father, having all of these different little artifacts and relics around. Sometimes he'll just put them on the floor in front of her and she'll just kind of feel them and, look at them and everything. But Laurel's father, Philip, is very aware of the fact that, there is this, this gift slash curse that Laurel has associated with the moon. And essentially the main part of his story, he's an important character in this book. He's a little bit more of a minor character, but his goal essentially is to try to find something to help his daughter so that she doesn't have to deal with these bouts of insanity the way that she does. He thinks that there's got to be something out there in the world. There's got to be a relic, or there's got to be some kind of healing ability, or there's got to be somebody who can sort of fix this or take this away from her, or at least help her to, maybe get rid of the more negative parts of her gift, so that she can find peace. He is associated with the Hierophant card in the tarot, and is very aptly, the name I've given him is the Peacekeeper. Very appropriate.
Yeah. This was also, I loved the variety with a lot of these, because where we had like the warriors and like the anti-heroes and the the kind of bad guy, and then we have Laurel, who's sort of our protagonist, or just trying to kind of find her way and navigate things, and then we have a very different mood here of somebody who is seen a lot of years, who doesn't have that same energy, but is has a lot of wisdom and a lot of accessories too.
Yes, the accessories were great.
Yeah. I think this was after sort of a major shift that occurred to me with character design, where I was exploring a lot of how to create details and build up a general level of detail and resolution without sacrificing the sort of the things that I had established earlier, like the areas of non-focus and and sort of a sound composition. So I was learning a lot of ways to sort of develop up those details without them being too distracting, or without there being too much going on in the piece. So that was certainly a fun challenge, and I had a lot of fun just taking all of these different bits and sort of zooming in a little bit and designing these various components of the things he's holding, and the books and the belt buckles and all that kind of stuff. I was just having quite a bit of fun with that. I like how that all turned out.
Yeah, it was really, really nice. And, I think that throughout these character pieces, it's been really cool to see sort of the evolution of character design.
Mhm.
And just to really see how you have approached each of these a little bit differently, and how they all work. It's really quite well.
Yeah, this was also an example of what I was alluding to earlier in terms of ways that that the digital process can really create some flexibility here, because as you can see, this was one of the earlier versions, and I had there was a completely different clothing color I was experimenting with, and I think you said something about wanting it to be a bit more kind of a little more humble, or sort of like pilgrim or
Right.
priest like, right? And because of this process that I've developed, I had the that set of clothing on a different layer, and so it actually wasn't a huge deal for me to just kind of shift that, and it's definitely like a great way to if you can develop a workflow like that, it's a great way to have some flexibility in your process.
It's great. Yeah, I can't I can't imagine having to just recolor all of that. It's great that it's just kind of, a little bit easier.
Yeah, yeah, it's one of the nifty things about working in Photoshop. And I think this one actually was one of the first of these that I created entirely in Photoshop, or at least the latter stages of it. I may have done the
Hmm.
sketches in Procreate, but it's just sort of a new workflow I was working on.
Cool.
So yeah, we have one more, and
Oh, yes, the
it
keyframes.
might be
Yeah,
my favorite, and it's I
good.
guess it's kind of a shame we haven't done more of these so far, because that we still have a few lined up in development, but we can at least share this one for now. So this is the
Oh,
kiss
yeah, the
scene.
keyframe. Yeah. So this one was really very, you know, very interesting to kind of convey, just the kind of what was trying to be shown here. Because I wanted to tell a story. I didn't want it to be too overt. I wanted to be there to be a little bit of a question about what was happening. Is she kissing him? Is she killing him? What is going on? Is it like a little bit of both? Um, and this is kind of one of the things about the story itself. This is an actual scene out of the story where I talked a little bit earlier about how there have been some challenges around my writing this story, one of which is that Laurel is an unreliable narrator. So,
Mm.
as someone who is a little bit unreliable and who goes through these massive changes throughout the story and these massive different moods, um, she goes through so much internal conflict, particularly around her feelings for Corcoran. Because on the one hand, she thinks he's just a total jerk because he's brash, he's abrasive, he insults her, whenever she asks questions that he thinks are just like ridiculous for her to be asking. Um, but at the same time, she does have this empathic ability. So she's able to see, that there is a lot more to him beyond what just meets the eye there. And she even gets a glimpse into kind of what turned him into kind of this more abrasive, brash, kind of aloof, hands off sort of person. So she kind of has to make a decision at one point of the story about, and here's where I really wanted to leave the question, you know, is she going to kiss him or is she going to kill him? So you have to read the book to find out. But I think that the really awesome thing with this is that somehow you're able to, like, somehow, I don't know how you did this, like, honestly, that you were able to capture that tension in the faces, in her face in particular. That internal conflict is definitely there. You can see it and feel it. And you're working with a very small space
Hmm.
and very limited action here. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah, and this one was certainly a challenge, and a challenge that really paid off for me. I remember there were a lot of moments during this where I was like, ah, man, like I might be, I don't know if I really know how to do this. But yeah, it worked out great. This was part of my reference board, and so mostly what I used was over here. And as you can see, this is what you were talking about earlier. I actually made a quick mock-up in Blender to use as a lighting, and also just sort of like a face lighting reference. And then I found some other kind of just stock pictures online. So that was really helpful to have those handy. And the other thing, I remember we had a little bit of back and forth around this because this was a situation where there was a logistical challenge with how to present this, and that was we wanted to have both characters' faces visible, but also to show what was happening, and to have the right angle to show all of that. And it's actually something that that comes up more often than you would expect, where a client might have two characters that are sort of facing one another. And I always kind of say the same thing, like that's going to really limit how we set up this composition, because either you're behind, if you think of it as a camera, you're either behind one of them looking at the other, or you're behind the other one looking at the other one, or you're straight on the side. And I kind of was exploring a few different ways we might be able to do that. Like in this one, her head is turned a little bit slightly towards the camera, which would show a bit more. In this one, her head sort of turned slightly away, but we can see a bit more of what's happening in the body pose. And we ended up going with this one here, and I'm glad we did, because the focus is really about that tension in that moment, and everything else is pretty well implied. And there was also that question of at what precise frame, if this were if this were a film, at what precise frame are we pausing this? Is it during the kiss? Is it just before? Has the knife touched the neck yet? Or is it, these very, very subtle things that could totally tell a different story. And I think we ended up kind of deciding together that we wanted to show that the knife was just barely touching, but but almost like her arm was pulling back, so there was no force in it. And I had to be very careful about how I set up the hand, so that it didn't look like she was actively doing anything with it. Just that there was that slight risk of that she might have already.
Right.
And then in terms of their proximity, I think having that moment just before something happens, it creates tension in the scene, and that's really compelling for any viewer to just want to know exactly what's happening next.
Yeah, that's very true. That's something I had to think about also on my end was, what do I want, what would really make the most impact in terms of kind of creating that tension. I kind of, in addition to being like a huge literature nerd, I am also a huge art history nerd. So I actually kind of thought about a few of my favorite pieces, um, and just sort of which one happened to make more of an impression on me. At one point in my life, I spent quite a bit of time in Paris actually, and so I got to see a lot of the art, and two of my favorite art pieces. One was by Rodin, the Kiss, the Lovers, which is a very famous statue. It's just two people kissing. And then another was one that I saw at the Louvre, Psyche and Cupid. And it's that moment just before. And I'm like, ooh, I think that it really makes for a much more tense moment if it's, not quite like, the moment of action or like the moment of a kiss, especially when you are trying to create tension like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I tried to think of it a little bit as an artist too.
Yeah.
So, I think just working on so many of these for so long has really helped me think more visually like that, or at least think about references that I've seen to kind of help also to give input where I can.
Yeah. Well, I think it turned out great, and
It's really
it sounds
good.
like some of our viewers are thinking the same. Thank you for your input, Jose. I'm glad it's great to hear you say some nice things about this. We're gonna have to restart the meeting now, and then we can just do some closing thoughts here and talk a little bit more about Viper and about sort of the author artist relationship a bit, because
Yeah.
I think we've explored that quite a bit. So stay tuned. We'll be back in just a few seconds here.
All right.
All right,
All right, we're back
we're
again.
back. Um, yeah, Jose, I'm gonna be I'll be sharing some more stuff around this as well. So I'll definitely give you guys some, maybe a time lapse or some more insight into this piece and some of these others moving forward as well. Keep an eye on the Instagram and some other stuff as well. So yeah.
Your
Let's see
stuff
here.
is amazing. I think you have time lapses for all of these, and which is really cool. And it's just been really fun. Just talk a little about the artist author relationship. It's been really fun, really working with all of these, and working with you has been really very easy, very seamless. In creating these. A lot of times, when authors think about design or illustration, I think a lot of times it's very easy to think about it in like children's books. Or I guess there's two ways to really, that I think often art authors will think about illustration in. The first is children's books. Like you hear a lot about people writing children's books and they want illustrations for children's books, which is great. We are definitely not talking about children's books when it comes to this kind of art. Um, But I think sometimes authors can also kind of approach um, working with an illustrator, like for character design or this kind of thing, almost the same way that they approach a book cover, which is not really the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that more when people are working with book covers, there are textual elements that are involved. It's actually something that I always have to think of, like whenever, I'll talk about the balance of seven side of things in a minute, but I always kind of have to think about that when you do book covers. Is, oh gosh, like, how do we kind of create some concepts and, throw some ideas out there that are not going to, your art is so strong as it is that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it can be a little, like it can compete with the text if I have too much text,
Mm-hmm.
particularly on the back blurb of books. So, that's kind of one of the things that we as writers have to think about is how does the style work with text on it? And the other thing also is a lot of times when authors approach designers to create book covers, a lot of times they are using stock photos or they're using licensed photos of some sort and kind of photo manipulating them in certain ways to create an image. That is not really what you're doing when you're working with an illustrator. Like this is working from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times when I'm talking to writers who, are like, I don't know if I want to do illustration or if I want to, go with like, a book cover that's more, kind of photo elements, that kind of thing. One of the first questions I ask them is, do you know what you want? Because if you don't know exactly what you want, you might not really be ready to work with an illustrator. You have to be really specific.
Well, yeah, I think it's either that or you have to if you don't know what you want and you know that, you'll just have to be willing to give that creative power over to the artist.
That's true.
Not entirely, of course, and because, like as I've said before, the I think the foundation of forming, like a good client artist or a artist author relationship or artist client relationship is just communicating and keeping that dialogue going, and especially with new people who, like with you, I think we can do a pretty quick back and forth, and
yeah,
we my style very well, and you know what to expect in terms of all the processes and everything. But especially with new people, as an artist, taking the time to explain, first of all, having like a formal agreement, which even if,
yeah, super important.
yeah, like even if it's somebody you already know or whatever, it's like for everything I do, I have some kind of agreement, just so it's clear up from the front what is and is not expected or or acceptable, and in that, I'll outline revision opportunities and stuff like that, and as well as like the formal legal stuff as far as like ownership and pay goes. It seems kind of obvious, but yeah, you want to have your pay in there as well, because you'd be amazed at how many artists I've talked to are like, yeah, he said he'd give me this for this, but like I put like 30 hours into it, and like he's like, so as an artist, you don't want to end up in a situation where you're putting too much into it and you're getting requests for all these revisions over and over, and then as an author or as a client, it's definitely good to expect that from the artist, to expect them to tell you, like, for them to be clear about how many revision opportunities there will be, what can or cannot be done at certain levels of development, and that kind of stuff, as well as being able to check in a reasonable amount throughout the process.
Right. Exactly. Just kind of knowing that process and understanding it up front is really, really, really important. for writers, the last thing that, any of us really want to, wind up in is a situation where, maybe there's some disagreement and, it just makes the piece maybe take longer or it damages the relationship or that kind of thing. So it's really smart and really good to just have that stuff known,
Mm-hmm.
up front and really understand the process and understand kind of what's going to go on at different stages. Um, I think also just a really something that I've really enjoyed also just from from the author side is seeing, I really look forward to seeing these little thumbnails and getting to pick. I think that that's really cool. Like, where I have like six choices of,
It's
what
like
do I
a
basically
choose your
want?
own adventure story. Yeah.
Yeah. But I
Yeah.
found it to be incredibly helpful.
That's super important. And that's something I do all the time. I think that, one of the worst things you could do as an artist is just show up with, they send you the money or whatever, and they send you the brief, and then, a few weeks later, just show up with the artwork and be like, there it is. What do you think? I just put, 2 weeks of work into this, and you better like it, because if you don't, too bad. And I'm sure, I'm sure you've heard horror stories like that. I have as well, from both ends of it. And yeah, I think I always provide the opportunity for input and for choice, even if they're the kind of person who hasn't requested it or hasn't even
Not even
requested
there
anything
yet.
too specific. I have one client where he just all he gives me is the title of the album cover, and I'm supposed to to make something out of that, but
Hmm.
but I still will provide maybe like six different thumbnail options and give him the chance to have input, even if it's just like, yeah, number 5, all right, moving on with number 5. And or it might be like, if you get to a certain phase of development, you're like, yeah, can we try something different there? That'll usually be around like the second draft where those kinds of big changes can happen.
Yeah, and it is really good also. I had a thought and, it went into the realm of lost thoughts. But, it is really good as an author to be able to work with someone who does guide you through that process really well, and who does give you these opportunities. Oh, I remember what it is. Those opportunities for input. And I think, particularly with like you and me, Evan, like I've even gotten to a point where I'm really quite comfortable kind of letting go of a lot of that control
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes, we writers like to have control over our words and our worlds and things. But, I think that it's a good thing to let go of some of that, sometimes when you are working with an illustrator. I've gotten quite comfortable with it. And actually, I think I've kind of found some ways to make it more challenging for you.
Mm-hmm.
This
Yeah, absolutely.
latest key frame. um, this latest one that we have talked about here. It's the scene with the blade and a reflection
Mm-hmm.
in that blade. Well, there's a lot of, you know, I think also like as an author, we have to kind of know our limitations, as well, because I can ask questions until the cows come home about how this would work. And I don't know how to answer any of them. Like, I want this person looking into a reflection and seeing something else in the reflection of this very thin surface, a blade. They see something that is actually not like their own, face in the present. You have Laurel, like this young girl, and she looks in and she sees someone like, much older and who looks much different and scarier.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, how do you show that? Well, I have no idea as
Yeah.
a writer. And, I don't really know how to make those kinds of decisions about what do you show, what don't you show, how do you convey this? Is there even like a really creative way to convey this that I can't even imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, and that's the beauty of working with someone who does have a very, creative and kind of technically trained mind like you, where you can think of that stuff and you can kind of play with it and come up with some things where I'm like, oh yeah, that's awesome. Slash, I would have never thought of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's just one of the great things about having worked with you, is just constantly having a little bit of challenge too, and like knowing kind of what my existing skill set is, and then also saying like, yeah, why don't you, try to push that a little bit, and I feel like that's like, the next level of developing that kind of relationship, where you're actually, you have someone who can push your limits and, drive you to challenge yourself and do new stuff, and not just kind of, make the same thing over and over again.
That is true. Like, at this point, I kind of understand I'm kind of intense anyway. Like, anything goes, oh my gosh. But, I kind of have a feel now for what your skill set is. So it's not, within reason. I think that there's some things where I'm like, this one seems a little bit challenging. Like, I'm not going to ask something kind of silly like, can you draw a duck sitting on top of a squirrel inside a tree? And, something that's just way out there.
Uh-huh.
With something like this piece where I'm like, this is a cool scene in my book. Could he pull this off? I think he can. That's the stuff I can ask. And, also as the illustrator and as someone who's more experienced with this, you can come back. And I think you obviously know this, but you can come back and say, no, this is not doable. So.
Yeah. And that's, as for artists listening, that's always your choice, especially, I mean, preferably at the beginning of a project, you can say like, I don't know, either like, I don't know if this is right for me, or maybe it is, but like maybe this idea just, I'm not seeing how it's going to work. And so at that point you can say either, maybe I'll step back and you can find someone else, or this is, or propose an idea like, this is how we could do this in a way that I could manage it. And I think we've done that a couple times. So, seems to work out. I think we can probably bring this to a close here, coming up on 2 hours. So it's flown, just totally flown
really
by.
Has. Yeah.
But I did want to point people in the direction of some of the stuff you're doing, and some of the stuff I'm doing as well. So, where can people find info on the book and updates on that, as well as with Balance of Seven?
Oh, I will tell you all about that. So I'm really excited because somehow a small miracle has gotten pulled off, and the wonderful Silver Fox site, Devin Silver Fox, has created an amazing, awesome website for me. It's beautifulserpent.com. You can actually see all of that character art up there right now, plus the character cards, which tell a little bit of their stories if you want to check that out and see more about that. I'll also be posting some free stories there as well. I've got a newsletter that you can sign up for and get notified of those. So we will start doing that. The book itself is coming out in 2023. I know we have to just wait a little bit longer, but don't worry, there's going to be lots of goodies and delicious stories before then.
And more art.
Yes, and more art. Yes. Of course, all the art, right? In the meantime, I told you I kind of have the author hat, but I'm also, I do run a small independent press. It is Balance of Seven. So you can find a number of our books, including the Dragons Within series, at balanceof7.com. And They're also available essentially online too. You can just do a quick search. You can find them pretty much anywhere. They're in a lot of stores, all kinds of good stuff. So balance7.com, you'll see the dragons stuff. You can see some other stuff that Eben has done as well. He did the cover of this lovely book called Shiny Bits in Between.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little bit of a departure from some of his normal work, with the exception of the clouds, because Eben is pretty much the cloud guy. Again, huge shout out to Silverfox Sites and Devin Silverfox for all of her hard work on getting this website together in time for this interview. And come and check out the website, beautifulserpent.com. Come check out Balance7, balance7.com. And of course, check out Eben's stuff. Do you want to talk a little about that?
Yeah, totally. And all of these links are in the description of the video as well, if you guys want to check those out. I've put also the link to something I haven't formally announced yet, but I've just been sort of creating it in the background and dripping it in here and there. But I've been working on putting together a Patreon page where you can check out all kinds of cool behind the scenes content. Everything from like the raw PSDs of the images I create to exclusive time-lapse videos and narrated videos of like live recordings of my work, discounts, all kinds of cool perks and cool things you can get on a subscription basis, and it's anything from $3 to however much you want to. There actually, this is really cool. I made these different tiers that sort of correspond to different character archetypes, so you can kind of choose your adventure there. So check that out. That's just a great way for me to share more content with you guys, and also get a little revenue coming in so I can pay the bills. And you can also, if you're interested in commissioning work or just checking out more about me or checking out my portfolio, you can see all of that stuff at ebenschumacherart.com, which is also in the description there.
Very cool.
Oh, and you can find me obviously here on YouTube. If you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, because I'm doing a lot more stuff like this, and Instagram, where I show a lot of art and a lot of process stuff, and occasionally we'll share like a funny video of a lizard or something. I don't know.
You gotta go for the lizard, right?
Yes, gotta have them. Well, cool. Yeah, this has been super fun, and thank you to everyone who's showed up to join the chat, and I appreciate you all leaving comments and saying such nice things about the work. And Ynes, I look forward to hearing more about this book and reading it eventually, and of course making more artwork with you.
Thank you. And likewise, I very much look forward to it. Enjoyed it lots. Enjoy the rest of your night. And
thank you.
We will see you soon. Thanks.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.